So we need to hear more of this. That's what I heard from you all. I'm so glad you're talking about this. This is a hard thing to talk about. Those are the kind of comments that I received this past week from people like you in regards to the first episode of this podcast, Sex, Addiction, and the Missing Piece. Today, I want to cover a few different areas, a little bit of background, if you will. First of all, if you go to your search engine, whichever one you happen to use, whether it's Google or Yahoo or Bing, doesn't matter, and you put in the words, the term sexual addiction, you'll notice that one of the first things that pops up is a website. It's a government website. We refer to it as SAMHSA, but it's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's a clearinghouse for information about substance abuse, mental health issues, just like it says. It is incredibly comprehensive and has a tremendous amount of really great resources. And up in the upper right-hand corner, there's actually a search box where you can go in and search for particular topics. So if you go into your search engine and you put in sexual addiction, and one of the first things that shows up, which this tends to show up number one, and that reason it shows up number one is because it's such a huge site and gets used a lot. So it has what we call very good search engine optimization, SEO, in other words. One would think that you'd be able to find an adequate amount of information about sexual addiction on this site. Well, if you put sexual addiction into that search bar in the upper right-hand corner and you click on it, in fact, just to make sure, put quotations around sexual addiction so it only focuses on sexual addiction. Lo and behold, guess what comes up? Nothing. Zero. Zip. No items found in this search. What? How could that be? How could this show up as the top resource in a search, and yet there's nothing on the site about sexual addiction? I was incredibly perplexed with this, and so I actually emailed them just to make sure. And they said, for sure, there's nothing about sexual addiction on their site. And so I responded and offered to write something about sexual addiction. And their response was, we only accept written material from people within our organization. I thought that was rather interesting. So I thought, certainly there has to be some large agency that has some information about sexual addiction. It's not that unusual. So then I thought, hey, let's go to the CDC, okay? The CDC website, which right now, unfortunately and fortunately, it has a lot about COVID. This broadcast is happening, right in the middle of COVID. And thank goodness there's a lot of wonderful resources on this website about COVID, but they also have a search box in the upper right-hand corner. That's typically where you find search boxes on really big websites that have a lot of resources. And if you put in sexual addiction, I think you know where I'm going with this. Guess what comes up? Nothing. no items were found in this search. So apparently, SUMSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, do not recognize sexual addiction as a real thing. And that's a little bit disheartening, to say the least. Although, if you hang around this podcast long enough, you're going to find that there are a lot of people who would prefer that sexual addiction not exist. In fact, there's a lot of people even in my profession, that don't believe in it, or they want to call it something else, or they want to somehow diminish it. And part of the purpose of this podcast is for me to share with you information, research-based information. I'm really going to try to keep my opinion out of it. I will add 34 years of clinical experience in occasionally, but I want to provide you with research data about sexual addiction because it is a huge issue. It's a big challenge. And for it not to be acknowledged doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We call that denial in its finest moment. I'm going to segue for a moment here because I have a little bit of a backstory here. There's actually 4 books that I want to mention today. The first 2 are going to be really shocking. Okay. So I'm warning you. Okay. So like, if you're not sitting down, you might want to sit down right now. Okay. Because there's some language involved in which is a little bit shocking. Okay. So you've been warned, right? It's not inappropriate. It's just shocking. Okay. All right. Okay. We're good. All right. So here's the first book. It's called The Penis Book. Now I know some of you are probably feeling a little embarrassed right now. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he said penis. Yeah, I did. It's part of the male body. It's, that's what we call it. That's the real name. On the back side, it's written by Dr. Spitz. I just want to read a little bit from the back side. The Penis Book is his unflinching, comprehensive guide to everything from normal penis size to sex change surgery and everything in between. Nothing is left under the covers, including sexually transmitted diseases, low testosterone, and sexual dysfunction, featuring an actionable 5-step plan for holistic penis health, including advice on diet and exercise that benefits the entire body. This book is the essential guide to caring for the penis in anyone's life. Now, what do you think would happen if we had a book like this, The Penis Book, that was part of our mainstream curriculum? So we learned about the penis. Now think about that. Would it be so bad? I know some of you are feeling a little embarrassed right now. You're probably actually blushing, but part of the reason that we're having so many challenges with this sexual addiction is part of it is because we don't talk about sex openly and comfortably. We'd just as soon avoid it and not talk about it. And then when it comes to talking about the body, we've got all these sort of pet names and nicknames and other terminologies we use that don't even actually describe what the body does. But the Penis Book, great book, wonderful book. I learned a lot in it, actually. In fact, I earmarked a page here that's got a diagram about the effects of bicycle riding. And I was really curious about that because I ride a bike a lot, pretty much every day, actually. And it was addressing some of the nerves that get pinched and the blood vessels that are cut off through bicycle riding and the effect it has on the testicles, the penis, and that whole sexual region of the male body. So the penis book, the second one, and you can probably imagine what the second book is going to be based on what the first book was. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? Okay, take a deep breath. Here we go. Yep, you got it. The Vagina Bible. And I have to tell you, this is a classic. It's a classic because it not only talks about the vagina. Yes, I just said vagina. I did. Yeah, it's okay. That's what they're called. And, women have them. It's part of the anatomy, just like men have penises, women have vaginas. It's what they're called. This actually is a great book, not only about the vagina, but about women's sexuality. I've recommended it to a number of clients and they've all come back and been really happy. And in fact, most everybody that's read this has come back and said, I didn't know that's the way it worked. And they were referring to their body, not just the vagina, their whole sexual response system. Okay. So this is written by Dr. Jen Gunter. And I'm just going to read a little bit off of the back of this one. So many important questions, so much convincing, confusing, and contradictory information in this age of clickbait, pseudoscience, and celebrity-endorsed products. It's easy to be overwhelmed, whether it's websites, advice from well-meaning friends, uneducated partners, and even healthcare providers. So how do you separate the facts from fiction? OBGYN Jen Gunter, an expert on women's health and the internet's most popular go-to doc, I didn't know that about her, comes to the rescue with a book that debunks the myths and educates and empowers women. From reproductive health to the impact of antibiotics and probiotics, and the latest trends, including vaginal steaming, vaginal marijuana products, and jade eggs. Oh, you don't know what jade eggs are? You'll have to get the book and find out. Gunter takes us on a factual, fun-filled journey. Whether you're a 26-year-old worried that your labia are uncool, or a 66-year-old dealing with painful sex, this comprehensive guide is sure to become a lifelong trusted resource. So, same question. What if we had this as part of our mainstream education curriculum? And I don't mean necessarily in, elementary school, but, perhaps in high school or maybe even in college. But see, part of the problem with this whole sexual addiction starts with the word sex, the first syllable of that term, sex. We don't talk about it. And oftentimes what we think we know about it is inaccurate. We learn things from where? From our friends, from the media, little bits and pieces here and there, a lot of which is not correct. So fourth book, I'm going to overload you with books here for a second. Okay. This is called Sex and Punishment, 4,000 Years of Judging Desire. It's by Eric Berkowitz, who is a journalist and an attorney. And just a little piece off the back, from the bedroom to the courtroom, a riveting history of the law of sex, the raging frenzy of the sex drive, to use Plato's phrase, has always defied control. However, that's not to say that every civilization has not tried using its most powerful weapon, the law. At any given point in history, some forms of sex were condoned while others were punished. Jump back or forward a century or two, or across a border, and the harmless fun of one society becomes the gravest crime in another. Sex and Punishment tells the story of the struggle to regulate the most powerful engine of human behavior, sex. Now, this is a great read. It's really heavy, sort of thick. It gets into more history, but it gives an overview of this, what seems to be a challenge, a struggle with sex and just the okayness of it. And in a lot of cases, the not okayness of it. And so this isn't something that's new. This is not in our lifetime. This is not a new thing. This is something that's been going on, quite frankly, since the beginning of time. At least all of the written history would suggest such. And what it points out is how much shame is really created around sex, and how people of high status, people in control, have used the law as a way to oppress or perhaps even punish certain sexual behavior. So some of this challenge that we have, and even having a conversation about sex, much less sexual addiction, we have a long history with this, a very long history. Now, last book, okay, I promise for today, last book. This is a really great one, I think. And I say that because I haven't started it yet, but it got some really great reviews. This is simply called Media Sex, okay? And again, I'm just going to read a little bit off the back of it. It's by Barry Gunter. What are the issues? In societies that enjoy freedom of speech, there is a tolerance for the publication and dissemination of all kinds of material. Some material may cause offense to the sensibilities of certain sectors of society. The dissemination of explicit sexual materials may often offend groups or individuals, but the issues of what is acceptable and whether there is any cause for concern are a matter of public debate. In this book, international evidence about media sex is gathered together. A number of fundamental questions are raised regarding sex in the media. The book represents the first attempt to examine the breadth of the questions about the prevalence and prominence of sex in the media, about public opinion concerning sexual content, about different effects, usually harmful ones, that allegedly follow exposure to media sex, and about the use of sex as a selling device. Theory, policy, and regulation are covered, and attention is given to the way to strike a balance between free speech rights of publishers and broadcasters and the need to protect society from undue harm. Ultimately, the book investigates measures that may need to be taken to protect the interest of the public without unnecessarily restricting the freedom to publish, excuse me. These measures include labeling and advance warnings and advisory tactics to ensure that the members of the public know what to expect and can choose for themselves what to consume or avoid. Now, like I said, I haven't gotten into this one yet. I just got it a little while ago, a few days ago. But I have done some researching on the media and sex, and it's really interesting. It's fascinating, actually. Also done some research on sex education, and those two roads, the sex and media and sex education, where those two roads intersect, we have a problem. And the problem is that we're using sex as a selling agent. Oh, that was really bad. That was not supposed to happen. Okay, I just got interrupted right in the middle of my broadcast. Okay, it's called life, right? So I'm going to keep going here. So those two roads, sex in the media and sex education, where they intersect, as I was saying before I got interrupted by my computer, reminded me that I have a call in 10 minutes. Uh, we have a problem at that intersection. And the problem is that we're exposing people to certain sexual messages that everybody has the right to express, but we're exposing people, particularly younger people, without any education or a minimal amount of education or guidance or direction or an interpretation as to what it means. So there's a piece of research that I just want to bring up. And this is real recent research, September 20th, September 2020. It's from the International Encyclopedia of Media Psychology. So just want to highlight a couple pieces out of this. Sexual content in traditional media generally follows sexually objectifying gender scripts and emphasizes sex as risk and responsibly free and non-committed. Mainstream pornography strongly represents sexual activities as violent and aggressive, objectifying and degrading, and skews away from intimacy and safe sex practices. In general, a positive link emerges between mainstream pornography consumption and sexual aggression. Sexual media exposure is one of the many socializing agents shaping sexual behavior. They go on to say 84% of all music videos contain sexually objectifying imagery, including sexual and suggestive dancing, provocative clothing, self-touching, close-up shots of sexual body parts, and sexual objectifying practices. Sexual objectification is also prevalent in music lyrics. Lyrics are oftentimes sexually degrading in nature, featuring hyper-masculine and sexist, example, portraying men as sex-focused and risk-taking and women as sexually submissive and appearance-focused. Print media contains sexual references as well, especially sexually objectifying messages and imagery that are supportive of the heterosexual script. For instance, women's magazines encourage readers to improve their body in order to appear sexually attractive to men, whereas Lad magazines, Lad, okay, is written by a Brit, I think, or somebody from the British Republic. Lad magazines stimulate casual sex and define good sex for men in terms of the variety and quantity of partners. Now, I know that there's going to be some arguments about that, and I want to say that I'm not a prude, okay? And I don't have a bias one way or the other. I'm really wanting to find out what's going on, what's behind the scenes here, in which has gotten us to this place of having so much difficulty talking about a subject like sexual addiction. And part of it is that sex, just like I said, that first syllable of the first word there is a really hot topic, meaning that it's very emotionally charged. There's a lot of opinions about it. There's a lot of emotion about it. And unfortunately, there's also a lot of silence about it. So as we continue on in this wonderful journey of sex, addiction, and the missing piece, I'm going to be sharing more with you about these kind of background foundational pieces that are going to help us together figure out, like, how did we get here? How did we get here and have such difficulty talking about something, dealing with something, addressing something, and more importantly, what we can begin to do about it. Okay, so right now, just enjoy the story, enjoy the buildup. And again, I appreciate the comments and the questions. They're very helpful please feel free to drop them by, and I will respond in accordance. I will include the information you're asking about in future episodes. But we're going to call it a wrap for today. And this is Ken Donaldson, your host for Sex, Addiction, and the Missing Piece. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again very soon.